Coming up, leaders of South Korea, the US, and Japan condemn North Korea's recent provocations and promise even firmer ties for collective action. US President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping are set to meet each other in person for the first time since Biden took office. We look at what the two are likely to discuss. Plus, South Korea's men's national football team has left for Qatar, while the players in overseas leagues, such as Captain Son Heung-min, are set to join their teammates in Qatar at a later date. The Taeguk Warriors showed their motivation to work hard before leaving. Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. We begin as leaders of South Korea, US, and Japan issued a joint statement condemning North Korea's provocations and pledging even closer trilateral ties and collective action. Our editor-in-chief, Moon Gun-young, is traveling with the President Yoon Suk-yeol and starts us off from Bali.
A well-coordinated trilateral response complete with security, economic, and diplomatic components to North Korea's 7th nuclear test. Leaders of South Korea, US, and Japan met in Phnom Penh late Sunday afternoon to rally support in the face of increasingly brazen North Korean missile tests and a looming nuclear test, and a day before a high-stakes meeting between US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping.
한미일 공조는 보편적 가치를 수호하고 한반도와 동북아의 평화 안정을 이루기 위한 강력한 보루입니다.
The trio issued a joint statement reaffirming the U.S. commitment to reinforce extended deterrence to South Korea and Japan, backed by the full range of capabilities, including nuclear, stating their intent to share North Korean missile warning data in real time, to launch a three-way dialogue on economic security, and declaring their will to stand as one against economic coercion.
And we face real challenges, but our countries are more aligned than ever, more prepared to take on those challenges.
North Korea's provocations, unprecedented in both their frequency and their manner, continue, and we assume that there could be more coming. I truly hope that our trilateral cooperation will be cemented further as we counter such challenges resolutely.
Although the trilateral gathering was heavily focused on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's recent escalations, the statement shows the three leaders also discussed preserving peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and confirmed their commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. This, coupled with President Yoon's announcement of South Korea's new Indo-Pacific strategy, which Seoul's top office says is largely in step with the U.S. version, observers say this may be the right time to sit down with the Chinese and find out their reaction. With South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol now in Bali for the Group of 20 Leaders Summit and Chinese President Xi Jinping also attending the multilateral event, it appears Presidents Yoon and Xi will come face-to-face for the very first time in the G20 framework. An official sit-down between the two leaders, however, hasn't been confirmed. Moon Gun-young, Arirang News, Bali.
And not just a trilateral summit, but South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol yet separately met on Sunday his counterparts from the US and Japan. North Korea and the US Inflation Reduction Act topped the agenda with Biden, while pending issues were discussed with Kishida. Our Yoon Jung-min with this report.
Some 6 months after their first bilateral summit in Seoul, Presidents Yoon Suk-yeol and Joe Biden were back at the summit table, this time in Phnom Penh, on the margins of the ASEAN summits for talks that lasted for 50 minutes. Topping the agenda, an airtight South Korea-U.S. joint defense posture in the face of an unprecedented level of threats posed by North Korea, and a warning that the regime will be met with overwhelming force involving every possible means if there's any use of nuclear weapons. It's in line with this consensus that consultations remain active between the two allies to strengthen extended deterrence. Also addressed were concerns by South Korean electric car makers, as Mr. Biden said, according to Seoul's top office, that Washington should consider contributions by Korean car makers and battery makers when implementing the Inflation Reduction Act. The White House, however, only mentioned in a readout that discussions included the role of private companies in combating the climate crisis based on the act. Meeting his American counterpart, the Korean president made it official that Seoul will join the U.S.-led Partners in the Blue Pacific, launched in June to ramp up cooperation with Pacific Island states. President Yoon also sat down with Japan's Prime Minister Yoon-Kishida on the same day for 45 minutes, only 2 months after their first meeting in New York. In a statement, Seoul's top office said they agreed to continue communication to resolve pending issues in a speedy manner, apparently meaning compensation for Korean victims of Japan's use of wartime forced labor, rhetoric that we've heard before. The leaders saw eye to eye on condemning a series of missile launches by North Korea and agreed to work together with the U.S. and deal with it on a UN Security Council level. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
U.S. President Joe Biden and the leader of China, Xi Jinping, will meet in person for the first time this afternoon local time in Bali. They're expected to discuss issues like Taiwan, North Korea's provocations, and Russia's war in Ukraine. Biden said earlier that they both have to figure out what the red lines are at this meeting. This comes amid tensions between the two major powers and recent U.S. restrictions on Chinese technology adding fuel to the fire. The two leaders also come with strong domestic support. Biden's Democratic Party has cemented control of the U.S. Senate in the recent midterm elections. And Xi Jinping comes into the meeting as one of China's most powerful leaders after securing a third term. The talks between the two leaders are expected to go on for about 2 hours. Now, over in the U.S., the Democrats have held on to their slim majority in the upper chamber of the country's Congress, despite some very tight races. Catherine Cortez Masto's narrow victory in Nevada late Saturday finally delivered a decisive result in the national political battle. With this, the Democrats now lead with 50 seats to 49 in the Senate. Even if Republicans win the last remaining Senate race in Georgia, Vice President Kamala Harris will be able to cast a tie-breaking vote. Starting Monday, South Korea will begin administering booster shots for COVID-19 that protect against both the BA4 and BA5 strains. Reservations for these new bivalent vaccines opened last month to everyone 18 and older who got their primary shots at least 120 days ago. Until now, there had been only 2 kinds of bivalent vaccines, those from Moderna and Pfizer, designed to protect against the BA1 variant. But it's the BA5 strain that's been dominant in Korea since July last week, accounting for 9 out of 10 cases. Test results suggest that the new bivalent vaccine offers about 3 times the level of protection against BA4 and 5 compared to other vaccines. The World Cup kicks off in a week, and the Taeguk Warriors are now making their way to Qatar from Seoul. Players based overseas like Captain Son Heung-min will join them at Doha, with just 10 days to go until their first game against Uruguay. Head coach Paulo Bento said the team is focused on achieving the best possible results. Kim Yo-sun with this report.
South Korea's men's national soccer team left for Qatar early Monday morning with the goal of qualifying for the knockout rounds of the World Cup for the first time since 2010. Of the 26 players who are on the final national team roster, 8 currently playing in Europe will be flying directly to Qatar due to their respective schedules. Son Heung-min, currently recovering from a fractured eye socket injury, will be the last player to arrive on Wednesday local time.
Of course, we know that the results we reach along the process were important, and of course we will try to do everything.
The Taeguk Warriors will begin their Group H games against Uruguay on November 24th before facing Ghana and Portugal on November 28th and December 2nd, respectively. All 3 matches will be held at the Education City Stadium in Al Rayyan, just west of Doha.
If us defenders do well on our part, our team is fully capable of scoring.
One extra player, Oh Hyun-gyu of Suwon Samsung Blue Wings, is also traveling with the squad as a possible replacement for Son. After arriving in the host country, the team will officially begin training late Monday evening. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea's central provinces of Chungcheongbuk-do and Chungcheongnam-do have won a joint bid to host the Summer World University Games in 2027, a competition also known as the Universiade. After a vote in Brussels at the International University Sports Federation, it was announced on Saturday that the Chungcheong region beat out the U.S. state of North Carolina. The two provinces bid to host the games as the Chungcheong Mega City, which for this purpose will include the cities of Daejeon and Sejong. The 2027 Universiade is expected to bring together some 10,000 athletes and officials from 150 countries. They'll be competing in 18 different sports. The event is expected to create an economic effect worth more than $2 billion. CPR can help save lives, but research shows that only about 1 out of 4 cardiac arrest patients in the nation received the necessary help before an ambulance arrived. Fortunately, more and more people are looking to get trained in the procedure. Our Ishiu went to attend one herself.
On the night of the tragedy in Itaewon, business owner Zahid Hussein witnessed ordinary citizens doing their best to help.
I saw a guy shouting that if there's anybody who knows CPR, please come and help. So a lot of people jumped up, volunteered, and they tried to help.
Since the tragedy in Itaewon, public interest in CPR has risen.
Before, many people took CPR training because they had to, but since the Itaewon tragedy, there are many learning voluntarily. Many people also have experienced situations where CPR was needed and feel they must prepare.
So how does one perform CPR properly? First, when you notice someone experiencing a cardiac arrest, check the scene for safety. Then check for responsiveness by shouting and tapping the person. If there's no response, ask others to call an ambulance. Also, ask someone to locate and bring the nearest automated external defibrillator or AED. Give 30 chest compressions at the speed of 100 to 120 per minute. That should take around 18 seconds. Then give 2 breaths by opening the airway using the head tilt and chin lift technique. Continue giving sets of 30 chest compressions and 2 breaths. Use an AED as soon as one is available. In South Korea, CPR training is offered at local fire stations, public health centers, and private training centers. But there is still a lack of English first aid classes available for those from other countries.
All the global centers, Seoul Global Center, Yoksam Global Center, Itaewon Global Village Center, all these global centers should have this kind of training sessions for foreigners also.
Experts say that in times of emergencies, even those without training should attempt to do CPR.
Even if you are untrained or nervous, the 119 dispatchers will guide and counsel you through the process over the phone. So ordinary people who aren't trained can also conduct CPR effectively.
But proper training is nevertheless the best way to prepare for emergencies. With just 30 minutes of practice, we have the tools to save the loved ones around us. 이시후, Arirang News.
Now, continuing with the Itaewon tragedy, a special investigation is underway, as many may know already, with many witnesses and other individuals being questioned as the nation's investigative body looks to understand more about the tragedy of what happened on October 29th. 158 people are now confirmed to have died from the tragic crowd crush. And as the investigation continues, we ask what the focus of the inquiry will be. We connect with Professor Choi Kyung from Hongik University's College of Law. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Now, many government officials have been called up for investigation, but I wanted to ask about the focus of this investigation. Is the focus on whether the government could have prevented the tragedy, or is the focus on whether government didn't respond well to the emergency situation?
So looking at the people who are currently charged and the scope of investigation, it seems that the focus right now is very much on how the emergency services and the police have responded to the tragedy on the night, rather than whether this could have been prevented and what the government could have done more to prevent it. And in fact, this is the reason why I think a lot of people are concerned about the investigation, because a disaster like this that ended up in crush death that has killed so many people is not something that you can really respond to very well when it actually happens. So, things you do after the disaster occurs is really not a lot that you can do there. It's not like you have hours of golden time. You literally have minutes where you can actually save people's lives. And here, prevention was much more important than any sort of response to it afterwards. And the fact that the investigation seems to be very much focused on frontline officers, people such as the chief of the fire station in Itaewon, who were actually at the scene, and people like that. I think this is what causing people a lot of concern.
Right. And also, essentially, the nation's police will be investigating police officers themselves. Will this affect the course of the investigation in any way?
This is another concern that people have raised, that essentially this kind of self-investigation is not likely to be done properly, and they may essentially let people go who should actually be charged. But I think that actually there's an opposite concern, because this is one really big investigation that the police has to do on themselves, since the separation of powers occurred between the prosecution and the police. And the police now have a lot more investigation powers compared to previously. And they will be under a lot of pressure to show result because this is such a huge investigation of national interest. And so my concern is that they may actually bring undue pressure on people that they are investigating. And we have already seen that 2 people who have been under investigation by the police have taken their lives. We are not entirely clear as to the circumstances of their deaths, but most likely it came about as a result of the stress and the pressure that they have been put under due to the investigation. And so rather than the concern about self-investigation resulting in proper, inquiry, I actually have the opposite concern, that they might be bringing undue pressure to bear on people. And the second thing about that is that they are not really investigating the people who are at the top of the chain of command. I have heard an analogy being made about the situation to a person where right now they're investigating the hands and the feet, whereas the hands and the feet don't actually move on themselves of their own accord. They only act in accordance with the directions given by the brain, and they haven't really, looked at what the brain had been doing. And so that's what's lacking, I feel, in this current investigation.
Right, and regardless, there's huge pressure on the police agency right now. But the Special Investigation Unit has also called up individuals that were caught on camera as possible instigators of the tragedy. How likely is it that individuals like this will be indicted for causing this?
So certainly they might be part of the investigation, but I think it will be very difficult to put the entire responsibility or blame on those individuals. We'll have to see what kind of evidence they unearth, but already they've had one red herring in the shape of a man who was accused to have pushed people wearing bunny ear costume. And more recently, they are accusing 2 other people wearing traditional masks of spilling or deliberately spilling oil on the street, making it slippery. But once again, we come back to the point that this kind of disaster can only be really prevented by having proper preventative measures in the first place, and taking those kind of rescue efforts afterwards is already too late. And so I feel that the focus of investigation really should have been, where were the mobile units that should have been in place to control the crowd? Where were, the police officers who could be directing traffic? And where were, those signs to redirect traffic to other places? And those kind of very simple measures that they should have taken, and they could have taken easily before the disaster actually happened.
Well, Professor, thank you so much for your insights this morning. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley, standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning, Doyon.
Let's start in Türkiye, where a bombing in Istanbul has killed at least 6 people.
Well, that is right, Doyon. At least 6 people have died and over 80 were injured in the blast. Now, the bombing took place on Sunday at 4 p.m. local time on a busy street in the Beyoğlu district of Istanbul, the nation's largest city. Now, initial reports say the bomb may have been detonated by a woman in the popular tourist and shopping district and that she fled the scene. Turkish officials have called the bombing a terrorist attack, but no suspects have been named and no group has claimed responsibility. Meanwhile, all videos and images of the attack have been banned from social media by the city's criminal court. This is the second time that the area has been targeted. In March 2016, a suicide bombing left 5 dead and 36 injured. An Iranian man who spent several years living at an airport in Paris has died. Mehran Karimi Nasiri's stay at Roissy-Charles de Gaulle Airport inspired the Steven Spielberg film The Terminal, which starred Tom Hanks. Nasiri had been granted refugee status in Belgium after saying he was expelled from Iran for participating in protests. While traveling in 1988, he became stuck in limbo due to a lack of paperwork and ended up living at the airport. In 1999, Nasiri was granted the right to remain in France, but stayed at the airport until falling ill in 2006. The 77-year-old returned to the airport just a few weeks before his death. Turning to the U.S., where 6 people have been killed after 2 airplanes collided at an airshow in Texas. The 2 World War II-era planes hit each other in midair on Saturday at the 3-day Wings Over Dallas airshow. The annual airshow was held in honor of Veterans Day and saw crowds upwards of 4,000 people. Those killed were all on board the aircraft and no ground casualties were reported. According to officials, the planes, a B-17 Flying Fortress and a P-63 King Cobra, were not moving abnormally and were flying a bombers on parade formation. The Federal Aviation Administration has launched an investigation into the crash. And finally, New York City over the weekend saw 16 of the world's best breakdancers battle it out for the top spot at the 19th Red Bull BC One World Final. Competing on a circular stage in Saturday's women's and men's finals were competitors from the US and the Netherlands. In the women's event, India Sarjo from the Netherlands upset title defender Logistics, becoming the youngest to claim the title at the age of 15. Meanwhile, Victor Montalvo from the US emerged victorious after beating Dutch competitor B-Boy Lee, making it his 2nd title win.
Good morning. Rain over the weekend brought the very final stages of autumn to the country. Compared to Saturday, there was a big drop in readings on Sunday. Then it's a chillier start to the new week this morning. And especially those in the southern parts of the country will notice a much chillier start. Now, cloudy skies will be a feature in most parts with light rain in the forecast in the capital region and west of Gangwon-do province during the first half of the day, although there won't be that much. And those in inland regions, meanwhile, need to drive with extra care due to that thick fog. Afternoon highs will be hovering in the mid-teens, a couple of degrees higher than season norms. Seoul and Daejeon will be seeing a high of 14 degrees Celsius under mostly cloudy skies, but decent air quality is expected nationwide today. This Thursday is already the Sunung test day. There will not be a major drop in readings this year, just wide gaps between lows and highs. With that in mind, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that'll do it for today's New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for our Tuesday's edition at the same time. Please stay with Arirang News though for more updates throughout the day. Have a lovely day or evening wherever you are, and take care.
부산항에 그리운 내 형제